Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 26 of Forget Your Warranty, the review series for Gran Turismo's aftermarket tuner cars. And this particular vehicle is a slightly more down-to-earth, you could say, tuner car. It's not as extreme as, for instance, some of the time attack cars or drift cars, which tend to be already very powerful and pretty quick vehicles. Then when you tune them, of course, it gets even better. Whereas with a car like this, it's more a showcase of what the company is capable of. And this is a perfect example of that. It's a Civic Type R, the EK Civic, already a very capable and very popular car, but this is the spoon upgraded version of that Civic. Now, tuner cars like this don't generally have a huge amount of use or a huge amount of really reasons for buying them. Because after all, many of them end up being less powerful and oftentimes slower than the normal versions anyway, and they are more expensive cars to begin with. So really, what's the point? Then, however, you do occasionally get a vehicle which is genuinely better than the normal version, such as the TRD version of the Celica, which is a far better car than the Toyota dealership version of that same ZZT231 Celica. So the question is this car more that occasion, where it is genuinely better as an alternative to the normal model, or is it more an occasion where the car is just more of a visual change? Ironically enough, like the Spoon Integra, which I said is not a bad car. I personally like it, I use it as a drift car, but it's not necessarily better than the Honda version, it's just different. Well, I would say to some degree this car does kind of fall more into that second camp. It's not a bad car by any means, but is it really worth the 75 grand price in comparison to the roughly 20 grand of the normal EK Civic, especially when you can buy a premium EK Civic for 20 grand? It doesn't really seem to be that great a deal. You get a 1.6 litre, naturally aspirated, of course, VTEC engine. It's front-wheel drive still, it weighs 820 kilos, which is pretty good. It has 324 horsepower, which is quite a bit less than the premium Civic. 171 foot-pounds of torque, which isn't really that impressive, all things considered. Peak torque and power, incidentally, arrive at 10,000 RPM. It is a very, very rev-happy engine, and it likes to be worked hard. The horsepower per tonne is pretty good, close to 400, and the PP isn't too high at 507. In fact, it's actually quite reasonable compared to what I would have expected a car like this to be like. I would have probably fielded somewhere in the region of 520, maybe 530 pp for a vehicle like this. Not because it should be, but because that's just the way it tends to go with cars that are light and have a decent amount of power. So the question remains, for 75 grand, is it worth even considering, or should you just simply get the Honda version instead? Well, it depends on the kind of person you are. Depends if you're a Civic fan or a JDM fan or a Honda fan in general, and it also depends what you want or need from the car. If you're looking purely for value for money, well, of course, just go for the Honda version. It's less than a third of the price, and it's a faster car, plus it's a premium. It's a done deal. If, however, you already have that Civic, maybe you already have the base model of this Civic, the non-premium, then you might want to consider it if you are, for instance, a really big fan of the Civic. Maybe you're a completionist, or you just like alternative versions of a car which you love. And I can understand that. There are two different versions of the Pagani Huayra on the game. There doesn't really need to be, but there is, and I bought them both anyway. Likewise with this car, some people will want both just because they enjoy driving the Civic Type R, and that's fair enough. But for the rest of us, those who are looking purely for the best option for the cash, well, then you just don't really need this car. It's not bad in any particular way. In fact, the handling is outstandingly good, maybe even better than the normal Civic. But the fact that it is slower in a straight line, has less power, and is quite a bit more expensive does kind of hinder it. Overall, this is like the Integra, and that really is the best opposite example of this car, more of a niched vehicle. I would recommend this above all else for people who are, as I said, fans of the Civic anyway, in particular the EK Type R, but people who want an alternative visual version It's got the decals on the window, the carbon bonnet, which also, incidentally, you cannot have on the normal version of this Civic, because it's not the premium one. And if you want that, like with the Integra, then go for it. Otherwise, it's just not an essential purchase. But that's it overall for this particular review. It's a fairly simple one because it doesn't really differ a huge amount from the normal car. But that's it overall for this particular pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.